Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Full Throttle Finance, a financial literacy podcast that's geared towards dissecting complex financial topics into fun, relatable discussions. My name is Felicia, and I am your CEO, and with me is Allison, who is our senior bookkeeper. Together, we focus on revving up the financial foundations for athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders in business. Regardless if you're operating from an established program already, or if you are just getting started, we are here to help you make small shifts that drive better financial performance.
I feel like we need theme music after that. Dun, 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 dun.
Thank you, Felicia.
In our last episode, we talked about the importance of monthly or quarterly financial debriefs, why they're helpful, and how we navigate these debriefs with our own clients. Today, we have an exciting episode lined as we shift gears to talk about the most legendary races in motorcycle history, the Daytona 200. And we're not stopping there. We're also diving into the massive event that surrounds it, Bike Week in Florida, and what that means for economy, small business, and tourism in that region. Felicia, you've got a background in hospitality management. You've lived in Florida. What is the impact and what does it look like during Bike Week for businesses?
Absolutely, Allison. I mean, literally, I was born and raised in Florida for over 25 years. So Bike Week was definitely a big part of my life, even as somebody who lived in Central Florida and really didn't grow up with motorcycles. If you live in Florida, you know about Bike Week. You feel it everywhere you go throughout the state for the entire week. But the Daytona 200 itself is such a special race. And when you combine it with Bike Week, you really do have one of the biggest tourism and economic race events that happens in the United States. And Florida is a state of hospitality and tourism. That is how
100%.
Florida generates revenue, is through tourism. So everything from your hotel bookings to restaurants, even vendors that set up shop at events for Bike Week or at the speedway itself for the 200. It really is just a great way for small businesses to fuel income in a really big way. And I'm excited to break all of that down today. So it's been a while since I last attended the 200 because I moved away from Florida. 2014 was the last year that I went. So it's actually been 11 years to be exact.
Wow.
But yeah, but it is really a unique environment to be at as a spectator and a fan of competitive motorcycle racing. The venue itself, the Daytona International Speedway, is a very historical landmark, and being surrounded by motorcycles of all makes and all models, it really resonates that motorsport culture everywhere you look. And then although it is on the Moto America calendar, it's not technically a point scoring championship race. So really it just sets the stage for talent to just be what it is, a true spectacle of the best of the best. And I grew up vacationing with family in Daytona too. So, there's just something about Daytona. Salty breeze mixed with octane and revs. It really does make my heart sing. And I'm very sad that it's been so long since I've been to the 200,
I feel like it feels like a movie when you go. Everybody's on bikes. Everybody's just happy. The vibes are just fun. I would love to go to the Daytona. I love how you call it the 200 too.
Yeah.
So let's start with the history of the Daytona 200 itself. For those who aren't familiar, this race dates back to 1937, and it has become one of the most prestigious motorcycle races in the world. It's really unique because it's not part of the MotoGP or World Superbike, but it attracts the best of the best to compete from around the world to compete. And like a typical circuit race, the Daytona 200 is held at Daytona International Speedway, which features a mix of high-speed banking and infield road course sections. The layout makes it a real test of both skill and strategy.
That's right, Allison. And let's not forget that the main goal of this race is about endurance, right? You said it's cute that we call it the 200, but it's because it's a 200-mile long race, which means pit stops, tire management, fuel strategy all play a huge role in the team's success. Pit stops with cars are fun and exciting, but honestly, pit stops with bike are twice as chaotic, in my opinion. And it's truly like, it's amazing to watch. Like I couldn't get out there and do a lot of this stuff.
No.
That's too much pressure for me. I'll stick to my numbers. There's just so many more moving parts to managing an endurance race that you don't see in like a standard 15 lap race, let's say in the Moto America series. It's really a showcase of the best of the best. And winning at Daytona is a huge deal in any rider's career. Some of the biggest names in motorcycle racing have taken home the checkered flag at Daytona, and the race just continues to be a stomping ground for top tier talent every single year. Something interesting that I recently learned about the Daytona 200 that I did not know was that originally it was held on a 3.2-mile beach and road course, not the speedway. I thought it always took place at the speedway, but a Floridian who doesn't know actual Floridian like history, go figure. But it actually wasn't until 1961 that the race moved to the speedway. So they actually had the history of the race has competed on two different courses essentially.
Yeah, and I also read the roads were a combination of hard packed sand and a paved road. Yeah, not for me. I'm actually picturing how sketchy the sand is when you're riding a bike normally and just like going super fast. Not a vibe. You know,
Right?
people must have really been talented to be able to ride in those conditions because I sure couldn't. In 1961, the move to the speedway added the challenge of steep banking, which requires even more skill to navigate at high speeds. So, anyways, I thought everyone would enjoy to learn about how the race progressed over the years as well.
Yeah, I remember it wasn't the 200. I think it was actually, I went to the Rolex 24, which is a car race, but it actually happens at Daytona. It's International Speedway as well, too. But I got an opportunity to actually walk out onto the steep banking. And like, it's wild. Like, it is wild. And the fact that these athletes will go around that banking at the speeds that they're doing is like insanity.
Can I tell you my intrusive? Can I tell you my
Yeah.
intrusive thoughts whenever I was riding my motorcycle? So anytime I would go to get on the highway and you kind of have to like, go around those tight corners, my intrusive thoughts was always like to just like tip my bike down and just like let my knee drag across the pavement. I don't know why. I just made me think of it, but like these guys are literally like, inches from the pavement themselves and they're doing the banking and like they're just casually doing
Well,
it.
I mean, if you've got that intrusive thought, then I mean, maybe the answer is that we need to get you on a sport bike and
Right.
get you on a track so that you can
Right.
actually touch that corner with your knee. No, that's great. And so, Allison, like one of the other parts about this race that I really love most is the variety of manufacturers that we see compete so fiercely and end up on the podium. We've seen winners with Yamaha, Honda, Suzuki, Ducati, Kawasaki, all of those machines. And really, Yamaha does historically hold the most victories at Daytona. So it's really going to be interesting to see how things shake down this year. I know there are a lot of big names that usually compete in the 200 that are not this year and vice versa. There's a lot of people who have not competed in the Daytona 200 that are competing this year. So really, the championship this year is anyone's game. And I am so stoked to watch how this race pans out. In 2005, we saw the switch at the 200 go from 1000cc super bikes to super sport 600cc bikes. Reason was to increase the competitiveness and safety, right? These banks, these high speed super bikes and Daytona, just not the safest. And so I really appreciate that too, right? I appreciate a sport that can recognize where they can improve safety and keep the competition as vibrant as it is in the paddock. And I think that all of those reasons are just like why I love this race so much and why I'm so excited to talk about this race. It's unique. It's just like not like your standard two-wheel racing that you see across the United States for the most part. And like we said, the Daytona 200 is one of the main highlights of Daytona Bike Week, one of the largest motorcycle rallies in the world that brings in thousands of riders, fans, and businesses to Florida every single March.
Well, and so you brought up Bike Week. The tourism that is involved in this event each year is insane. Hundreds of thousands of motorcycle enthusiasts descend on Florida for a full week of events, concerts, rides, and of course, the Daytona 200.
You're totally right, Allison. And some of the numbers that I found were actually like really staggering. I expected them to be big numbers, but when I started doing the math, like they far exceeded my expectations. So Bike Week itself brings in over 500,000 visitors annually, like 500,000 visitors. And it generates on average 75 million in revenue for the local economies there in Florida. So, and that's including everything from hotel stays, Airbnbs, restaurants, fuel, event tickets, events. If you do the math, right, over a 7-day week, that's almost $11 million per day of local revenues that
My goodness.
these suburbs in Florida like directly benefit from.
It's not just Daytona Beach that benefits, right, Felicia? I don't know about you. I'm always looking to save a couple dollars when I go to an event. So I'll end up staying in a town nearby for my Airbnb just to save a couple bucks. And this means everyone in the surrounding areas may also be benefiting. Like if you own a bar, restaurant, or even just like a souvenir shop, a gas station near Daytona Beach, Bike Week can be your most profitable time of the year. But with that kind of influx, there's also an operational challenge. Hotels aren't operating at like full capacity. Restaurants need extra staff. Vendors have to stock up on their products. And that's where good financial planning comes into play. And as business owners in the area, you have to know about the events going on and have completely planned for it at the beginning of the year to make sure that you have enough supplies and people to handle the influx of customers.
You're totally right, Allison. And having worked in hospitality myself for many years, I can tell you that big events like this take months and months of preparation. Hotels increase their room rates because the demand is higher. They have to accommodate for the higher demand with adequate staff. And that's staff for housekeeping, that's staff for food and beverage establishments on site, that's staff for your hotel lobby attendants. There's a lot of moving parts just in the hotel realm on its own. And hotels will also often require multi-night minimums so that they can guarantee the turnover for a certain profit margin, right? If they're going to be fronting the work and putting all of this extra labor involved with this event in play, they want to make sure it's going to be worth it for them in the long run. And you see it happen with restaurants too. And they'll bulk up on inventory, they'll adjust staffing to make sure that they can handle the crowds accordingly, keep the food and the booze flowing because good speedy service on a busy night can yield a really big return, especially if you're an employee in a tip receiving position or just in general, a business owner seeing the dollars wrapped up in the POS system by the end of the night,
Well, and it just reminds me, I used to work in the restaurant industry in Stillwater, Oklahoma during like college football. And I remember on game days during college football season, I worked at Eskimo Joe's and they would staff out like 100 people between kitchen staff, between wait staff, between like, busing and all that kind of stuff just to serve the people that were there. And like, I wasn't old enough to serve at the time, but like I talked to some of the servers and they were bringing in, I remember this one girl, she said that she loved game days because she would bring in around $1,000 a night. Could you imagine? I mean, I think it was more like, working like an 8-hour shift, but it's like, I can only imagine working like Daytona and seeing the benefits as a business owner. And if you could just play it right, you could literally be making enough money that in your slower months, you're still making a high profit for the whole year. It's not just hotels and restaurants either. Think like clothing stores, motorcycle dealerships, repair shops, and even independent vendors. A pop-up shop or an event at Bike Week can mean big profits if businesses plan well.
That's right, Allison. The most underlooked benefit, in my opinion, too, is the revenue that goes directly back to the city of Daytona Beach, Florida, or to Volusia County, where Daytona, it's part of that county. With sales tax, right? All of the sales tax on the 75 million in revenue, right, that's collected, all of that goes back to the individual cities and the counties that are all around wherever this event's happening. So in this case, it's Daytona. But when you think of Moto America and you think of some of the other events like Sturgis, right, that is very similar to Bike Week that happens, like those revenues, the taxes that come out of those revenues, they go directly back to the surrounding counties. So when you look at something like Volusia County, where Daytona Beach is, and you see that their population is about 500,000 people, just think of all of the good things the city can do with all of those revenue tax dollars for that county. And that's how we boost our economy. We choose how we spend our money. And when you choose to spend money in a way that supports things you love, you see the trickle down effect and the benefit for everybody else that gets to benefit from you spending that money. When you put that in relation, 500,000 people in 75 million in revenue over a week, like those are really big
Crazy.
numbers, and governments can do really, really great things for people with that money. So there's a lot of positives for the small businesses that they benefit directly from these revenues. But then there's this second layer of benefits that everybody who is a small business owner, who is an employee in that region, right? They get to benefit from their city making all of this tourism revenue from just this one event that takes place 1 week every year in March. It's crazy.
No, I love it. And Felicia, we're always trying to make things into something you could learn from. If you're a motorsport professional or business owner, what could you learn from events like Bike Week and Daytona 200? Personally, I would say the biggest takeaway is understanding the seasonal revenue cycles. If you know when the money is coming in, you can plan for the slower months.
I agree, Allison. And if you're a business in a city that hosts events like this, you should absolutely be leveraging it. Whether it's marketing to attendees early, adjusting price strategies, or even offering special promotions, smart financial moves and preparing for them well ahead of time really do make a big difference in your revenues. The motorsports world is not just about racing. It's about understanding a very delicate financial ecosystem that keeps this industry running. And events like Daytona 200 and Bike Week and Sturgis and all the other events on the Moto America calendar, they prove just how massive that impact can be.
Yeah, and I was even thinking in September, my family and I like to ride out to Fayetteville, Arkansas for the Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue Rally. And
Mhm.
this is like a smaller biker rally, but like you ought to see the mass quantity of people that flood into Fayetteville, Arkansas. Like it's definitely, so you know, getting way smaller in scale to Daytona, but like it's still just crazy to see the bars, the restaurants, the clothing stores. Like it's just crazy the revenue that it's bringing in. And on that note, I was actually thinking about Sturgis. So back in
Ooh,
2018, my family and I rode out to Sturgis for my sister's wedding. Sturgis is one that rivals Daytona with the amount of people that show up to it. So, like, instead of getting an Airbnb or hotel, we camped alongside hundreds of other people. So, like, you think about that too. Like, now small campgrounds are getting this, you know, huge amount of revenue from people camping. And everywhere we went, there were tons of people everywhere. This is another event as a business owner, you can help fund for your whole year. And it only goes on for 10 days. But the crazy thing is I remember like my dad, he goes down for like the first week or so of it, because it's 10 days. So he would go down like a couple days beforehand. And so like imagine the quantity of people riding to Sturgis and spending all the money on the way to
yeah,
Sturgis. And
exactly.
so for like the week leading up to it and then the week afterwards, these businesses along the way all over the United States are benefiting. So I just think it's
Yeah.
cool.
And I mean, talking more on Sturgis too, like, because again, it is very comparable to Bike Week. When we lived in Colorado, like Jacob, my other half, he worked at the BMW dealership there, and it was like a BMW Harley dealership. And so
Mhm.
you would have people from Colorado going all the way over to Sturgis and everything too. And it's the same thing. Like all those businesses along the corridor to get there, like they prepare for it every year because they know economic impact that it brings. And if they can make enough in 10 days to
Yeah.
cover expenses for 3 to 4 months, and then they set that money aside, right? They don't just spend it. They set it aside. They strategically plan for their slow months. Like that is how you flatline cash flow. It's all strategic, and I absolutely love it. And I think that's probably why I enjoyed putting this episode together, and probably why we've had so much fun talking about motorcycles and Daytona 200 and Bike Week in Florida in general. I think that's actually probably a good point for us to go ahead and wrap up this week's episode of Full Throttle Finance. We really appreciate you tuning in and taking steps to strengthen your financial foundations. And we hope that you found today's insights valuable and that you have enjoyed the shift of talking strict numbers and rigid accounting processes to talking big economic impact and how business helps stimulate our economy. If you want to learn more about what we are doing here at Clean Bee Consulting, you can always visit our website. That is cleanbeeconsulting.com, CLEANBEE consulting.com. Be sure to subscribe and join us next week as we continue to break down finance with a motorsport twist. We will see you next Friday.